So this is my video reflection essay podcast thing. I find this a lot easier for me to speak my mind, so here we go. I am a white, female, cisgender, heterosexual, Roman Catholic / atheist from a middle class SES. I come from a lot of dominant groups and I'm not afraid to admit that. But I also came from a very small town, so learning a lot of this stuff has been really hard for me, especially because I come from a family that's very, well, I guess you could just say old world. It's probably the best way to do it. Very set in their ways, but that's basically who I am, and that's my social identity. Learned a lot about social identity going through this semester and how it's important to realize who you are and to own it. I love owning everything about myself, from the fact that I'm a tomboy to a goofball to the fact that I always fight for gender equality in sports and everything like that, and that's definitely where my social justice fight comes in, I guess, but I'm getting back to that later. Just kind of going through my educational process on oppression. I've always kind of known it's there, but it was just washed over. Everybody was equally as well off. Even the people who said they had no money were the ones shopping at Abercrombie and Finch every week. So it was very much so that we all fit in and we just did what we had to do to get through the day, and that was that. But learning about all these different ways of oppression and all the different faces and all the ways you never realized you were oppressed. Religion is definitely a very common one where I saw that, it could be oppressed through cultural imperialism. But as I grew up more, religion became less and less of a cultural imperialistic type thing. There was more celebrations of Hanukkah and Kwanzaa, and bringing about the different types of holidays that are celebrated around this time of year, and even the stigma of taking away Christmas vacation and making it like a holiday break or a winter break. So I feel like, there's been definitely some advances, but there's definitely areas where there's so much more. I never knew what cisgender was until I took this class, and even then I had to look it up because it's just so uncommon to me. But it's been definitely an education for me. But common themes I've seen throughout every type of ism we've studied this semester is definitely stigmatization, and that's in the sense that nothing is as bad as it seems it is until somebody makes it a problem. So it's not a problem to have boys and girls on the same team when they're little 5-year-olds, but as soon as you get to middle school, you separate them, and that's really around middle schools, high schools, when you start to see the division in females and males in sports, and that's where it all of a sudden becomes such a bad thing. But little kids, it's no problem at all. So where does this come from? It comes from this stigma and this label that are put on people that, boys are better than girls. Girls cannot do this. So I go back to gender because I feel like it's easiest for me to talk about gender because it's where I'm in the less dominant group. It's where I can actually speak out about being oppressed and being a girl. I'm very fortunate to come from a lot of the majority groups, the dominant groups, but I've always tried my best not to be a perpetuator. I just think that it's kind of, awful that the stigmatization is where it comes in. But I also feel like a lot of times this whole stigma comes in because you have the radicals. You're always going to have those people that take everything to the umpteenth level, and that's where a big problem comes in, is when you take it up to that level 10, that level 12. But in all honesty, it's definitely something that has been a problem, and I feel like that's where I've been seeing so much of this, and I don't truly understand where the stigma comes in except for the fact that it's what we know, it's what we accept. Especially in our culture, I don't understand how we can belittle women so much or belittle Jewish people or any of those when really they contribute just as much to society as we do. So some of the things that were iffy for me was there's definitely touchy topics where I was even afraid to participate. And a lot of those were issues such as race or issues like transgenderism. And race is such a problem for me is because in my line of work, everybody just naturally assumes that I'm going to be a racist. I'm so far from that, and I've definitely had situations where I was just trying to help people, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're only talking to us because we're black," and I'm like, "No, I'm talking to you because you're passed out on the floor. I'm concerned for safety," and they just didn't want my help, and it had nothing to do with race or skin color. They were passed out on the sidewalk outside a bar, so obviously I'm trying to make sure they're okay. So when it came to race, especially being a group leader for race, I had to sit there and just take a couple breaths, because I know I've been put in such an awkward place with it. And coming from a school where 95% of my school was Caucasian or Indian, there was no other races. We didn't have Hispanics. We didn't have African American students. We barely had any Asian students. We had a very set demographic in our school. So trying to learn all these things, when I did my racism presentation, just taking that step back and going, okay, this is what I need to read. It was an eye-opening moment for me, just kind of seeing that, take myself out of the picture and just focus on the facts. And I truly learned a lot, and I was definitely excited for that project. Once I got to learning it, I was still very touchy when I was group leading. I was trying not to, say anything wrong. And that's, I think, a lot of my problem is I worry about saying the wrong thing. And I know that it's just kind of, people will educate me if I say something wrong, but I'm always afraid of being wrong, afraid of offending, because that's the last thing I ever want to do. All I wanted to do is learn. I feel like another part where that came in is transgenderism, and I've just had such bad experiences with people, and even with heterosexualism, with people and their sexual identity, because I never knew. I've never learned. And I had a very bad experience where I got, shoved away because I said the wrong thing, and nobody would educate me on what I was supposed to say, and I was trying my best. Dear Lord, was I trying my best. But, it's came to a point where finally somebody sat down and they're like, look, I know you're trying, which is why I want to help. And I got to learn, and then coming into class, I had a very limited knowledge of it. Just what I had been told from my friends who had tried to teach me so that I'm not left out. But it's also been just eye-opening knowing all of these people now. I've met so many transgender, pansexual type people, and they're willing to educate. And it's wonderful to see that when you prove you're trying to learn, how much people want to teach you. So the more I've shown people that I want to know, I want to be educated, and I want to pass that along, the more they're willing to educate me, and I've learned so much. And I just feel like, since I've gotten to college, I've removed my personal stigmas that I've had. Because, trust me, when it comes to don't ask, don't tell, New Hyde Park, Long Island, takes the cake over the military. They got nothing on them. But I've learned, and it's just reflecting back on the class from where I was at the beginning. At the beginning, I was a little sheltered, human who didn't know much. Kind of came into the class thinking it was more on other cultures, not as much on isms. And I was really pleasantly surprised when I started to learn. I remember doing that initial self-assessment and just thinking like, well, I don't know why I should do this. I'm so open-minded. I know what I need to know. I don't need to take this. Like, I was the most open-minded person from my town, and I've had people teach me things. And now I sit and I realize how ignorant that was, just to think that I knew everything I needed to know about these cultures. I didn't even realize that there was something called ageism. And realize that actually I've a couple of times been, in the minority for that. So, it's just been such a learning experience just to sit through all of this and sitting through the classes and the discussions and realizing how many people have had similar stories to me and have had dissimilar stories to me. And I guess I just had that ignorance from where I was from. And it wasn't that I tried to perpetuate it, it was just that was what it was. That was what my world was. I was taught a certain way and never really thought I'd know much else, and that was my life. And I actually would mock my sister a little bit, who would come home and try and talk about some of these stuff. I'd go, no, we know what we need to know. And I'd make fun of her. I'd be like, oh, you're over here, you're talking about all this stuff you don't understand. When really I was the one that didn't understand until I sat down. And I've learned so much. I think this course is so important that I've even brought it up to the CJ department about making it mandatory, because I don't understand how anyone can work in the public sector without taking this class. So I've rambled a lot more than I meant to, but realized like how much I've personally gained from this class and how much I think everybody needs to gain from this class, because in all honesty, a lot of times you're ignorant without knowing. And I would hate to be perpetuating any more of these stereotypes that I've realized that I have. And at points I definitely was ashamed when I realized how much I had perpetuated. But I was also in awe because I realized how much I'm learning, and the fact that I can have these reflections to learn that I was being the ignorant one, not my sister. I was being the, sheltered one, not my community. Because I can't blame everything on my community. I had my own access to computers and books and stuff, so why didn't I look it up myself? So it's just it's definitely a class that makes you think, and I think that's what I've loved about it. I've never really had to push myself to come to this class. I've always wanted to come and hear what people have to say, because there's so much out there that just the public school systems don't find necessary. So I would definitely say that I gained a lot from this class, and I hope this was reflective enough. I'm trying to think so much more about everything I do, every situation I go into, and even with mental rehearsal, I like to try and think how I'd respond in these situations, but I know when push comes to shove that I'm definitely much more conscious of my actions and realizing that I can, even though it's just me, I can change some stuff. I can teach people now. I can't teach to the level that I should be able to at this point in my life, or that I'd like to be at this point in my life, but I definitely think there's some aspects of this that I can start to teach people, and for that I'm forever grateful. So I guess that's a good place to end this, but I guess my final reflection is ignorance definitely isn't bliss. I'm ashamed of how ignorant I was, but I'm proud of myself on the same note for coming back and learning so much about stuff I never really even realized was a problem. So, yeah.